May the 16th, 2026. Guys, most of the world is aware that Lake Mead and Lake Powell are in trouble in the Colorado River Basin. And Lake Mead alone, supplies electricity to about 40 million people downstream. Well, because of the record low water levels that are here now and quickly approaching, I think it's been underestimated a little bit about how critical this thing is. Because, again, we got information coming in that Lake Mead is down 6 feet in 60 days. Again, and it's doing some inflow take from Powell above. But it's down, and one of the guys there in Vegas that reports on it was showing that just 2 days ago, down 6 feet in 60 days. And remember, a lake is like a ship's hull. Closer you get to the bottom, the less volume there is. It's a V, right? So the drop will accelerate as the temperatures rise and as the water acreage decreases because of the volume. So that's going to be a major escalation in the problem. And what are we seeing? You know that we talked about 150 to 160 proposed data centers in Phoenix alone, but in this water basin from Vegas and up above it and down, there's almost 600 data centers that have been either planned or finished. But what I'm seeing, and it's got to do with this video, is that now the reports are that 30 to 50% of the new data startups are either postponing or canceling completely the projects. And that leads us to why the big four, Microsoft and that group, they came in and got the prize first, if you understand what I'm saying. And that prize was the water. It can only be shared so many times, and they've already not going to make it very far with the way they're doing it right now. Let's take a look at a couple of pieces of information, and then we're going to continue past this. Now at the top, we got Lake Mead. Lake Powell will be at the bottom, but Mead, as of today, is at 1,052.82 feet. Guys, that's 2 feet, 2.82 feet above what they call minimum power pool or hydropower seasons. Now that's a misnomer in a sense, because I don't think they've really put into place some of the new upgrades that are there at Mead as far as the turbines. But here's where it gets dangerous. Again, you start losing outflow. In other words, there's not a lot that can go out at that point. And they're already talking about, guys, October of this year, I think it's probably been 80 or 100 year water agreement between the nations and the states and the areas and that ends in October 26, and there's been no definite move on who gets what at that point. But I can guarantee you the big people have lawyered this thing to ad nauseam. In other words, they have put in place the fact that there's going to be a lot of water rights up for grab, right? Or up at least for negotiations. But what we've seen with the big companies like Microsoft and Bill Gates and those, they bought up critical agricultural land, not only in the Colorado River Valley area, but across the Midwest too. And what we're seeing now is a lot of times, and this is something been going on a while, and we've talked about it before, that it's a land grab. They will grow what they want to grow, whatever, right? But what has happened, and they realize the October deadline's coming up, and so they bought out these farms, and they are building data centers close enough to the tap. In other words, these farms have the longest of all of the contracts. They've had them for the legal water rights for their percentage, right? Well, the big companies made it more profitable to them to take the money than it would be to continue growing, especially in a droughted season with low water. But right now, the big data centers are being built at the very farm spigot, their allocation output. And so what they've done is buy up the farmers' almost non-negotiable rights for water to run the data centers. Again, 600 throughout this Arizona, Nevada, Utah area, through all of that, Colorado, 600 data centers. So they're using as much water as most cities and almost as much electricity. And again, there's the big four pretty much shut down the smaller guys, but they're still expanding. So you, again, in 2.58 feet from now, and again, it's dropping it, as one of the guys in Vegas said, 6 feet in 60 days, then we're pretty close to minimum power pool. But then 1035 is where it really starts to get very serious, because you got turbine damage risk. And the way that happens, you get a lot of air built into the and it's called cavitation, like a prop on a boat. If it's not done right, the actual air itself will eat away at the metal. So there's going to be, if it's not a full flow and there's a lot of air mixed in, then you're going to have cavitation damage to these turbines. Now, flow stops at 895, guys, but look, they're predicting now by the end of this year, this number to be at 1020. You understand what I'm saying? So you're going to have less water, and there's going to be almost no electricity coming from some of these areas. And those are the two things the data centers need most, and those are the two things that humans need the most. Who do you think will win that battle? Now, if we look at Lake Powell just below this, it's at 3526. It's higher elevation. Its minimum power pool sets at 3490. So we've got, 36 feet before that. Inactive pool turbine risk at 3,500 feet. So that would be 26 feet from now. And dead pool is at 3370. Think of that. So, again, we've got a balance between the two lakes. They're going to dump, really going on up above Powell to a couple of the dams up there to feed Powell, so that Powell can feed Meade, because Meade is the main source of the energy for that entire area. You know, Vegas gets it, Los Angeles gets it, Phoenix area gets it, and all the places in between. So as Powell goes down, you're going to see Lake Meade go down even quicker. But more than likely, we're going to see some sacrifice at Lake Powell to try to keep the turbines afloat at 1035. Again, 1020 is the expected rate, or the expected level, by the end of this year. And we're in month 5 now. Now, the big risk facing these reservoirs is that Lake Meade, at just 1053 again, Meade is experiencing an official level 1 shortage condition, triggering mandatory water allocation cuts to Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. It sets a mere 2.8 feet above the minimum pool of 1050 required to reliably generate power at Hoover Dam. Federal forecasters predict that due to restricted upstream releases, Meade could plummet to historic lows near 1020 or 1,020 feet by 2027. That's what I was talking about. Lake Powell is currently setting at roughly 37 feet above its minimum power pool of 3490. However, very poor winter snowpack, 55 to 60% of average, and low spring runoff forecast have federal managers warning that Powell could dip below the critical 3490-foot threshold as early as this August. May, June, July, August. Falling below 3,500 feet also risks damaging the lower outlet tubes and generating severe equipment damaging air vortices. Now, I saw a video this morning on those outlets there at Powell, and they're like big long slides, big tunnels, but they weren't designed for constant use or heavy use. And there's already big cracks forming and pieces of concrete missing in them from having to do this before. So they're not that reliable. But again, it will damage the lower outlet tubes, generating severe equipment damaging air vortices. And again, it's like cavitation. And when you mix all that air in with the water, it just does something different. And it's going to be interesting to see how quickly everything starts dropping. Again, Meade at 1052 to hit the critical 1035 foot turbine risk threshold, it only needs to drop 17.82 feet. Because of a historically bad winter again, this is going to become a problem. The lack of incoming water is causing Lake Meade to drop at an accelerated pace of roughly 1.5 to 2 feet per month. But in the last 2 months, 60 days, 6 feet. Under the federal government's most probable scenario, Meade would drop continuously over the next year, hitting 10/20/76 by July 27th. But we just read, not the Fed's report, but the 10/20 can happen by the end of this year. Okay? And when I put the numbers in, guys, it come out that Meade would hit 1050 in 28 days. That's mid-June. And then you've got just 15 foot until the 1035 level, where the cavitation damage to the turbines becomes critical. And what does that lead to, guys? No power. Okay? No power. Vegas, LA, Phoenix. Think about that. But the data centers are preparing to, as the humans become thirsty and are restricted and beaten down by water rules, they have tapped into the main supply. They have guaranteed their continuity at our expense. And again, 1035, guys, it would cause 12 of the 17 turbines there to shut down. They're at different levels. They've got a few, I think 4 big new ones, but still they're limited by the same restrictions. And guys, just as I said, they're looking at an 11-month horizon on this whole deal. But what they're going to have to do to keep that 11-month horizon for Meade is to sacrifice Powell. Powell is already almost being cut off from upstream dams because they need it. So it's pretty much on an out basis right now, not much inflow. And again, we're getting into the hottest part of the year. And the Las Vegas Review, guys, is reporting as of this month, 5 of Hoover Dam's 17 primary power generating turbines are permanently shut down, and one of the remaining active turbines is offline for repairs. Because the water line has dropped roughly 140 feet since 2000, 12 of the dam's older turbines cannot safely operate. The lower water level creates low hydraulic water pressure, which again risks generating violent vapor bubbles that causes this cavitation and destroys the metal blades. So what we're looking at is a catastrophe just over the horizon. But they're hoping not for the data centers, but the data centers, guys, have to realize that everything is not infinite. Water is not infinite. And the planet goes through changes. Drier years could last for a long time. Things like that. And of course, the heat from the data centers is not going to help anything. But they have put in place their safety net for the water. And when they do that, guys, when they put these big data centers on the big farms, they destroy the farmland. And it really creates an environmental problem because of the electromagnetic fields that irradiate out to both humans, animals. And it's just a rush pushing humans aside. Why are they in such a rush, guys, knowing that the resources are going to run out? And so I started getting into that piece of information. What I found out was, guys, the big people, and we've talked about this forever, are planning a complete bug out. They're going to run this thing in the ground, make as much money as they can. While they're doing that, they're building their own VARs, their own bunker systems, and stocking everything completely. So they, as the rest of civilization is gone, dying and thirsty, standing outside gates, protesting for a drink of water, which won't last long, then they are going to drive, the machines into the ground and wipe out everything. It's a planned depopulation event. At the same time, using AI to do God knows what. Another thing that they're doing, and I think it's the Pultec Group, one of the largest home building companies in America. And they're going in and bought a bunch of land, and they want to put up hundreds of homes in different places that comes with their own data center attached to each house. And what they're trying to do is spread out the liability in one thing and also spread out the cost. And what they're going to do is you can't get out of when they build these, if you buy the home, you are in the contract, okay? And these are big white boxes that mount outside the house that are going to have an extreme amount of EMF and a hell of a lot of heat involved with them. And they're very expensive. But the contract says you really can't touch them, don't fool with it or anything else. And what again, it's chaos at full speed. What they're basing this on and how they're pulling it off is they've made a deal that for a flat rate, I think $150 for your electric bill is all you'll have to pay of your portion while they use your meter to run the data center. In other words, they're running out of the ability to handle the big centers. So let's just creep like a virus into the neighborhoods. Again, this is new construction right now, but that could spread. And so even if it catches on fire, if it overheats because of processing, then your insurance doesn't cover it and they don't have liability. So you're just out there. But here's another thing about it. The way the power grids work is they have peak hours, like air conditioners in summer at the peak of the day, right? But at night, they don't use as much power. It's kind of a downtime, and you're at a lower usage, and that balances out. You understand what I'm saying? So the plan with the home-generated data center systems will run 24/7. So the power grids that are already stressed now by data centers, by the lack of turbines, things like that, they're not going to allow the grid to have the cool down at night as far as low power points. So it's going to be a 24/7 grind. And what they're saying, while you're sleeping, why let that waste? And which is so naive. It's not naive, it's greed with a little bit of stupid put in. Because then you're doubling the rate of the grid usage at the time that we're racing into no power. You understand what I'm saying? So the down times for the big power generating systems at night no longer will occur. But what will happen, and there's these clauses in the contract about the $150 light bill, that's all you'll have to pay. And you know, guys, that would put enough money in your pocket. It's a game. Put enough money in your pocket to make the notes on when you buy the house look a lot better when you're coming from a $500 or $600 light bill a month to $150. So you got that extra $300 or $400 that the bank is looking at to put on your home payment, right? But there's clauses in there to where if certain things happen to the power system or problems arise or more energy, then those clauses can be changed. In other words, quickly that $150 power bill is going to be useless because they're running out of power. Again, there's a mad rush as if they know that there's bad trouble coming. Is it just they know that the drought is here, or is it something else? Because if it was just the drought that they're concerned about, if they were, then they would hold back on building anymore and stop spreading the virus. But is there something else we're not seeing, maybe having to do with some of the disclosures in D.C.? Who knows? Is there something else they're seeing to where they just say, well, there's not that much time left, a couple of years, and we'll just burn it all down, make as much money as we can, do the devil's work and retire on our Hawaiian island or wherever it's at, bunker, in the mountain, wherever it's at. That is their plan, guys. It's exactly what they're doing. And guys, going back to the dam for just a minute, the 1035-foot mark, that's where the managers will have to swap operational strategies because it will damage the turbines there because of the air mixing in with the water. But they will have to switch entirely to the 5 what's called wide head units. And that will plummet the electricity output by 75%. Think about that, guys. That could happen this year, forcing rural utilities in cities like Vegas to buy significantly more expensive power from the open market. And how they do that, guys, is they buy from like a liquid natural gas power generating company or coal or something like that. And what happens? It's going to cost a lot more, and nothing is finite or infinite, excuse me. And so how they will spread that cost out to us. That's their whole plan. But it's only going to be outputting 25% of what it does now. Who's going to take the fall first? Vegas is the closest to the dam, and they may fall last because of that. And Vegas went in a few years back and dug a deeper drain pipe, basically, so they can go to even lower elevations without losing the Vegas water supply. So they were preparing for that. But things are accelerating very quickly now. And so, guys, the data center thing is kind of new in the last few years. We're starting to pay more attention to it and the ecological disaster that they're becoming. But there's 68 data centers in the state of Nevada. There's 600 from Vegas down to Phoenix and back up into Utah, 600. And guys, that is a network. And then in between all of that, they're buying up the big farms and the water rights. It's a squeeze. And they're saying that the local water authorities and utility providers are panicking right now. The rapid buildup of power-hungry AI infrastructure is threatening to create a severe double squeeze on the Lake Mead water system. That's power and water. Declining water levels at Lake Mead impact and intersect with the data center boom in several critical ways. Now, some of the locals there are trying to fight back. The Southern Nevada Water Authority has enacted a total ban on evaporative cooling for data centers in the Las Vegas Valley. This forced companies like QTS to implement water-free closed-loop cooling systems that circulate water through sealed pipes rather than evaporating it into the air. And that is how those home systems I was telling you about operate too. It says, however, in a May 2026 system analysis by the Desert Research Institute called DRI, revealed a major unintended consequence. And how poor planning can you do? I mean, never mind. High power demands. Air-cooled and closed-loop data systems require 2 to 3 times more electricity to run massive fans than evaporative systems, guys. Man, everything's running head into head, isn't it? Upstream water. Nevada's power plants consume massive amounts of water to cool their steam condensers to generate that extra electricity. While the data center itself shows zero water use on paper, and this is publicity, the extra electricity is pulled from the grid, and it forces local power plants to consume an estimated 1.44 gallons of water per kilowatt hour, water that is pulled directly out of the local rivers. They're not getting away from anything, just they can throw the blame in a little different direction. And that's how the game works. You spread out the liabilities, you sell it into people's homes, to get away from some of those liabilities and the cost of these mega data centers. And you lock in these subdivisions in an EMF cage. Now, going back 2 years to 2024, the data centers in Nevada consume 22% of the total electricity for the state. And they're saying that that could soar to 35% by 2030. Guys, 4 years from now, we're going to have a completely different conversation. As Hoover Dam's output plummets due to Lake Mead's drop, data centers are simultaneously sucking up massive amounts of clean, renewable energy from the grid. This has triggered an energy crisis in the region, and this is coming from electric. And again, the big boys came in first and legaled up and got the prizes. Local supply agreements in mid-May this year, Nevada, in which we are in, on the 16th, Nevada Energy cited data center load growth as a primary reason for abruptly cutting off long-standing power supply agreements with neighboring utilities, shifting that power to the tech companies. In other words, they can shift power from one area to the other if you have a grid down situation, blackout, or just a need for more power. Well, they just kill that. It's going to them, just like the water will. To keep up with data center demand while Hoover Dam slows down, Western utilities are proposing burning more fossil fuels. This worsens the carbon emissions, driving the very climate drought, shrinking Lake Mead in the first place. Now, that's up for argument. It doesn't help when you've got that many cars in a city next to a lake. But this goes to the snowpacks. Now, we don't know how much effect that mankind has had on the overall weather patterns of the planet. We're not told everything, but we definitely can see something is happening when you don't get the snowfall. You get 20 or 30% of it and you're already low, and look at what the data centers are doing. It's a head-on rush into disaster, and they don't care. And guys, when these data centers move in, they also drive up everybody's prices. It says on May 2026, the Reno City Council officially discussed placing a temporary moratorium or a pause on all new data center development until the state can pass the proposed Power Act, which aims to heavily regulate data center water use and prevent tech companies from driving up residential energy bills. Think about that. Just like I said, they're going to pass it on. Everyone's going to become a victim in that area, not only of high energy bills, but the heat, 6-mile heat domes, the EMF. It's going to become a land of silicon, not humans. And that won't last past the last drop of water. And now you see why there are 500 to 600 data centers currently feeling the squeeze in the states of Nevada, Arizona, and Southern California. Think about that. And where does Mead's grid go? To these 3 states. It says expanding the scope to include the entire regional grid that relies on Lake Mead's power. Nevada, Arizona, Southern California brings the count to about 500 to 600 data centers currently feeling the squeeze because of the Southwest operates on an interconnected grid. And that's always a bad deal sometimes, and it's about to become even worse. Hoover Dam's dropping water levels create a massive ripple effect across these multi-state facilities. Disaster waiting to happen, and there's nothing they can do about it. In a video a few episodes ago, I talked about they're trying to create a cryo-cooling system where they're not having to use the water like they are. And but that's down the road a long way. Just developing it fully, then building it, then installing it would be way past the points we're looking at. And it answers the question that I kept bringing up in the video of this series about, it was the first one about these data centers over in the Phoenix area. And I said, why? The guys, because they realized they could manipulate the people there, the governors, the leadership, whatever, into these agreements. And this would be a clean, inexpensive supply that they needed and so they mass concentrated the centers in these 3 states because of that reason. Cheap energy, cheap water. But again, they had to know what was coming, But that greed is so powerful that they cannot let go. And it's a race between the different AI companies. You've got Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, I think is in it, and many others. But there's the big four. And again, they came in with the most money. They got the most prizes. But they, again, have to know what's happening. And that's why most of the information points to them running it into the ground and bugging out. And so that puts us in a pretty bad situation. But now we've got to remember one thing, that their plans don't always work out, and no weapon formed against God's children will prosper. So in their plans of destruction, we're going to see Mother Nature again, our Father, His planning, shut them down. There's going to be some damage done between now and then, but it's going to, when they shut down, especially the big ones, they'll be trying to move, over into the Mississippi River Valley, that outlet, into anywhere they can, near your big lakes, whatever they can drain down. And they've already bought a lot of that property just for this reason. It's like the mad group destroying the world. It's really not like it. It is that, guys. It is us seeing the destruction, because Satan hates God's creations. You, me, and the planet. Like I said, they cannot be this naive. Let's look at the Hoover Dam metric. Industry experts point out that training and running a single modern hyperscale AI algorithm, not the data center, a single modern hyperscale AI algorithm can require between 1 and 5 gigawatts of electricity. Okay, that's a lot. Since Hoover Dam's capacity is about 2.8 gigawatts, a single major AI data center can demand up to 2.5 times the total power of Hoover Dam, the total output, 2.5 times of that from one data center. Now, where's the math? In northern Nevada alone, tech giants have proposed 12 upcoming data center projects that will demand 5,900 megawatts of power by 2033. That's not going to happen. This is 2.8 times the entire output of Hoover Dam just for 12 facilities, completely eclipsing what the shrinking river can provide. We've seen movies about this, and they're saying that because of the multi-state view, federal and state regulators are suddenly treating data center power demands not just as local zoning issues, but as a frontline crisis for the entire Southwest energy and water infrastructure. It's coming out of PBS. And that's exactly right. But what has happened, the land's been bought. The people in power, the politicians, may be involved. They may have a job waiting for them at one of these big data centers or for the company when they leave office. Money doesn't have to just change hands to get a deal done. You can help with campaign financing, running the ads, designing all of that, and you can have a cushiony several $100,000 job a year, maybe millions of dollars a year, sitting at your desk, keeping your mouth shut. Right, guys, and if you don't think that I'm serious about this and that we are facing something coming so much faster than most expect, but just this month, May 4th, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, took the rare step of issuing a Level 3 Essential Action Alert, its highest urgency warning, stating that the explosive growth of AI data centers is outpacing the bulk power system's ability to maintain grid stability. Who would win that battle? Would it be the ones with the most money? The baseline infrastructure of the American Southwest simply cannot build out liquefied natural gas, coal, or traditional transmission lines fast enough to offset the double whammy of Lake Mead's drop and the AI boom. That's the whole gist of it right there. They're outpacing themselves. Again, 30 to 50% of the smaller companies have backed out. There was not enough water or power. And that's a good thing. But the big four came in and filled everything up. So that's going to be a problem. Let me see if I've still got the pictures of the unit they want to put on your homes. Guys, and this is what they look like. It's kind of like some of the solar controllers and inverters and stuff you see now. But this is very expensive equipment. Some of these take about $1 million to build, and it kind of is going to tie into your smart meter. It's going to tie, and they're going to give you all kind of smart appliances, which is really great, isn't it? Just give them complete control of everything. But if it burns up, they're not liable. When it burns up, it'll burn your house down. And they've got a batteries system into the house too that can catch on fire. So they are passing the cost on to everybody. And the people, again, are being enticed by the $150 power limit bill per month. But what are you sacrificing? I would never do it. Most of you would never do it anyway. But if you buy the house, it comes with it. You can't touch it. And not only the EMF problem, but going back to as you sleep, this thing's running a loop, power loop, creating a tremendous amount of EMF into whatever room that would be. If it's your bedroom or den or something like that, that's not good at all. Even your smart meter does that. I've tested it with my EMF meter inside the room where the meter base is on the outside of. Now, but this is a lot more power. It's getting them out of the problem of all the water and the electricity, and that's in the public eye and in maybe on their ledgers. But when you're doubling the electricity generation from the peak of the day to 24/7, you're just draining the resources twice as fast. You're overheating the grid. You're never allowing the components to cool. You're never allowing the people in these homes to get a good night's rest. And unless you risk losing everything, you can't really do anything about it. But that's the plans. It's like a virus spreading to spread out not only the liability, but the water. You'll be paying the water bill, and this is going to have that new cooling system that uses 3 times the amount of electricity. That's what I was talking about earlier. So they're exasperating the whole deal in a rush to be the king of AI. They figure the biggest one will have the most powerful weapons as far as digital and rule the world as they watch humanity suffer. But our Father has a few surprises in for them. And that will be probably the rapid depletion of their energy sources. Guys, I just wanted to go here a minute. Let me show you one other thing. Just a little bit of the data about these units. They're called SPANs, S-P-A-N, and it's called EFRA, extra. It says SPANs extra nodes pack 16 NVIDIA RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell GPUs and 4 AMD EPYC CPUs into a single unit attached to the side of a home. The company plans to scale from a 100-home pilot to 80,000 nodes across the U.S. by 2027, providing over 1 gigawatt of distributed compute at the cost of the grid and everything else. It says homeowners get paid utility bills for flat $150 free internet, and 16 kilowatts of backup battery. By the way, they're LiPo batteries, and they're the ones that love to burn up. But experts flag concerns about grid strain, physical theft, and side channel attacks. What is a side channel attack? If a hacker could sit in his car and hack that and get into every system that data center operates with, which is satellites. You're actually providing, here is the data center that could be easily manipulated. Of course, alarms will go off, probably. Maybe not. Maybe they never knew a hacker was there. That is some of the side channel attacks. It has begun pilot testing a plan to install compact liquid-cooled GPU nodes on the exterior of newly built homes, with the homeowner getting subsidized credit, internet, and the backup battery in return. Again, these are like a cheap car salesman. We're going to give you a free cake or a hat or some pots and pans, and let's get you into a really messed up financial deal here. That's what they're doing. It's a little, candy. Here, take this, sign this. That's how it works. We're going to pay you most of your light bill and give you free internet. Hell, you should. You're attaching what some people are saying that much equipment is hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million. But compared to the big data center cost, it's nothing. Spread it out. Put the tentacles as far out as you can get them. And the SPAN is calling this a distributed data center solution. Each EFRA node sits beside a house, runs almost silently thanks to liquid cooling, which takes 3 times the electricity, and taps into the spare electrical capacity that most modern Americans' homes have already. It's not spare, guys. They're already running at near maximum. It's just a quiet period. It's not spare. That's their lingo to get the deal done. It says the pitch to utilities and AI companies is straightforward. Instead of waiting years for hyperscale facility to be sited, permitted, and built, deploy thousands of small nodes inside the existing electric grid. Data centers are loud, ugly, and often drive up local electricity bills. What do you think this is going to do to these people? And they're going to start wanting and pushing for these to be put in existing buildings if they have the time. According to CNBC, the interview there, that's the stock market channel, SPAN claims 8,000 extra units can be installed for 1/5 the cost of building a typical 100 megawatt data center with the same compute output. So 8,000 homes could handle it. Distribute the power out among the 8,000 customers. We don't have to buy land. We don't have to build a center. We don't have to really go to court over anything. The first wave focuses on new construction. SPAN pays for and runs all the equipment, though a company white paper hints at later retrofits and larger commercial node configuration. They've got a contract, guys, and you better read the bottom line on everything in these if you buy one or buy a home with it, or if you think about getting one put in. So we'll give you free internet and pay you half your light bill, or maybe more than half, while your family gets EMF sickness. And it won't be long before that 150 doubles and triples and then runs out and the damage is done. And the devil's in the details. And a SPAN animation shows the extra node housing 16 NVIDIA, again, these chips, and the whole setup that we saw, 3 terabytes of memory. Alongside the node, every participating home gets a wall-mounted SPAN smart panel and a 16 kilowatt hour battery, again, LiPo. The company's proprietary PowerUp software handles energy management across the whole setup. Rooftop solar may be added in suitable locations. In other words, they could, if they're in a power surge and they need every piece of power, every bit of power that they can into that unit, your stuff will be cut off by that smart meter. You understand what I'm saying? That's what it is. It's control. And so now you're buying the land, you're buying the home, and you're basically, I guess, it wouldn't be a 15-minute city, it'd be worse than that. But you're a prisoner of it in a sense, the electromagnetic fields. But the contract, as they stack on more nodes, think about that. And guys, you've seen the smart meters come out and prep for this. You've seen the big 200 amp mains now being used on the side of your house that houses the meter. But they're set up to handle the system. It says power capacity is the linchpin. Most U.S. homes built in the last 3 decades have 200 amp utility service. And Lander said in the interview, Span's analysis shows 80 amps are typically idle. So you're using 120 average, right? And what are they going to do? That is extra spare. Not conserve it, not maintain it down to keep the grid in shape, none of that. So the 80 amps are available at times, so we set that at the maximum power consumption for a single EFRA node. Now, if they add on, what's that going to do? They just said they could in the contract add on more nodes. How will that cut you below the 120 you can use of the 200 you're paying for? Listen, guys, I'm laughing because it is so ridiculous. But people will do it. People are going to do this. You're just not going to be one of them. And it's going to take a hell of a lot of court work, paperwork, especially, in the smaller areas, to get this pushed through to where they can come on your property and just mount it and hook it to your 200 amp main breaker and expose you to the cost and the effects. There will be battles headed in that direction before it's said and done. But our Father has a plan. These data centers are going to run out of power before they can come up with alternative sources. And if they do start using LNG and coal, it's going to triple their prices. And that cost will be passed on. And so again, that 80 amps is theirs, and it's 24/7. Think about it. And you got LiPo battery banks in there. Just not a good setup. And of course, it would depend on how qualified the installers are, and I'm sure they'd be well trained, but mistakes can be made on any setup. And when you continuously run power through a system like that, it can heat up also. And the reason those LiPos are going to be a problem is this. The company insists daily life inside the house would feel normal. Appliances would run as expected because the node uses only the slack in the home's electrical service. If consumption ever spikes, the home battery kicks in first to keep the GPUs fed. So here's the heat problem with your LiPos, your batteries. Should that not be enough, the system temporarily throttles non-critical flexible loads like what you're using, or like EV charging. Homeowners can use the Power Up app to set their own priorities for which loads gets curtailed and in what order. Sorry, guys. It's getting ridiculous. But there are people that will do this. The same ones that will stay in New York or Los Angeles and put up with all that crap will probably run straight to this. Full node shutdowns only happen during power outages. Utility demand response events or safety triggers. When that occurs, the affected workload shifts elsewhere on Span's network, and the household keeps using the backup battery for its own circuits. This home backup is provided to the host at no cost to them, contributing to greater energy resilience in addition to affordability. And if you were going to go down that road, guys, and they talk about possibly putting solar panels up for that and to supply their nodes. And there it goes. Anyway, the home backup is provided to the host at no cost, except doubling your light bill probably. And what are the insurance companies going to say about the LiPos running hot? And what is that going to do to the cost of your insurance? And when your water runs out, what are you going to do? If they have internal cooling, they don't need it. You can just let the house fall down because it's unlivable, and these little nodes are sitting there doing their thing, especially if they're solar powered. And so I would watch, and they mention it, for a major move into that. If they force you guys, try to make them ground mounted because it ruins roofs real quick. Mine are all ground mounted. And it makes it easy to work on, to get to wiring. You don't have to climb a ladder. And it's just, how many holes you're going to have in your roof before you realize you made a terrible mistake. And the heating under the panels gets real hot, and that messes up roofs too. So, but that will be the fastest, easiest way for them to do it. And so you're completely taken over. You just paying the bills now. You shut up, sit down, pay these bills, or we're going to take you to court and take you home. They wouldn't care as long as somebody was in it paying the bills for their new network that they don't have to build out into a big data center, because those are using too much and they know it. So there's going to be this rush will increase to these systems to put the burden on you and I on something that we see coming. And let's come back to this situation for just a minute. And we're already seeing some of the effects of how they will do it, but it says public utility regulations dictate how infrastructure costs are distributed. They came through a few months back, guys, and replaced the transformers on the pole, and they moved and did a few things like that. But our power bill went up $150. So that's what they're saying. The utility spreads the cost across its entire customer base. That's what the data centers will do. Data centers require massive multi-billion-dollar upgrades to high-voltage transmission lines. Studies by the Union of Concerned Scientists show that regular residential consumers end up heavily subsidizing these upgrades through higher monthly power bills. And guys, when you think everybody got whacked with about $150, think of that much money going into somewhere. And it's because they're building these data centers. And we're paying for it. And that's just going to increase. They're going to try to wear us down, just wear us out. But for those that endure to the end, you will be kept safe. Not saved, kept safe in the proper Greek. Think about that. That's a very powerful. And if you think about it in a minute, that kept safe, I mean, they're both good words. You want to be saved too, but kept safe. Why was that phrase put in there in Greek by Christ? Because he's showing us now the events that are going to happen, just like the Vera moment that I've talked about in 2 or 3 videos of this series, the underground cities in Turkey, Derinkuyu, things like that, Göbekli Tepe, underground situations, because knowing what was happening. That's how he kept people safe. That's why this information is being put together. A lot of this, guys, you can dig it up. But it's coming out, and it is a message to us for those that endure to the end. And that in itself is a statement. Why wouldn't you endure to the end? Is it that unbearable? Think about it. Is it, suicide is murder. It's premeditated murder. And if that's what they're talking about, then it is going to be tough. But we were told there's a tribulation of man before the wrath of God too, weren't we? If you believe in what Jesus said. That's up to you, though. You decide. But again, the tribulation of man is a tribulation by man on man. That's why it's called that. And then God has enough after that tribulation and the time we have to endure. And the wrath of God comes. We start seeing some harvesting going on. And you don't want to be the first in that harvest. Again, according to the book of Revelation, those are gathered for the fire. The second harvest of the wheat, not the tares, is gathered for our Father's barn. Now, think a minute about what implications that has on the very last few videos we've talked about the great houses, things like that. Just think about it. But I'm not going to keep you on here any longer, guys. This was kind of technical, but I tried to push the point, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not going to lie, but I'm trying to push this point to where it wakes people up, makes you start looking around a little bit more, keeping your eyes out. What's going on with the water situation? What's going on with the power situation? Can I make it without those things? Not many people can. There are a few, but a lot of people won't have a choice. You remember the old black and white pictures, guys, of the Dust Bowl during the Depression and things like that? People sitting out in a small shack, a couple kids, lady there, wind, the sand blowing, big sand dunes everywhere because they were so stupid they cut all the trees down on the fence lines. And the winds took all their soil away. That's how it works. God plants things for a reason. Anyway, that's what we're going to see, and it's going to start in the desert southwest more than likely because it is the epicenter of what we're seeing in our nation. But remember, the largest data center, I think, in the U.S., maybe in the world, is in Northern Virginia, close to D.C. So you got, of course, they have rivers there, things like that, but the desert southwest seems to be the first in line to suffer. And we talk about the fact that we were taught in grade school, and it looked back at things like the dinosaurs and everything else, but it says when things change, you adapt. So how do you adapt from lack of enough water to may have enough to drink but not plant anything, not grow anything? You adapt or you migrate or you die. Adapt, migrate, or die. That's the three laws of nature. When things change, where you cannot maintain it as they are. No water, no water does it. That's how people die in the desert. Their organs dry up and they start shutting down. And that starts pretty quickly. 3.5 days according to some people. And it starts, but that you live in those areas, and then it's going to be a creep from that area as the last tentacles are hanging on, spreading out of the desert. Just imagine this, into the Midwest where the big farms are that Bill Gates owns the water rights to now and the land rights. Build data centers, pump the water from the farmers next door, deplete the aquifers. That's going to spread. It's already happening. But as you see the 500 to 600 in this Colorado River area go down because of lack of power, they are owned by the same people that are in the other states, and it will just migrate it will be like a creeping cancer on the areas as it spreads out. And so into the ancient intelligence part of this, the whole thing is, and when we're talking about AI data centers and those problems, then we're talking about this. But that alone is I think one of the operations that our Father uses as a communication with us. Now I'm talking about not AI, but the real ancient intelligence is what we call the series. And we know that information can be stored in crystals, can last for up to 10 million years. That information can be retrieved. That's why we're seeing some of the technological advances move so quickly. CERN was just the start of this era. Now look at it. Now again, no tool formed against us will prosper. And that has everything to do with what I've been talking about this ancient stored intelligence. And now it's been invited into the Silicon Highway. So it's much smarter than all of us, technically, and not AI in the sense that you think. It's not a search engine. Anyway, our Father can use that any way he wants to. He works natural. That's what supernatural means. It means more natural. It's not mystical. It's more natural. And the crystals he created. He created the information that's stored in them from the days of the Sumerians, from the days that the Levitical priesthood had 12 crystals on their breastplates. The reason there's 12 crystal gates on the pyramid that's going to come down, we talked about in just the last episode. All of that ties in. And then this is episode 18. So 19, Lord willing, we're going to get into how those crystals tie in not only with what we're seeing, the new temple, but the breastplates and how they're being used in their colors, in their vibration now in this technology. And I think that's going to be very interesting. But I've kept you now for over an hour. Not trying to be too technical, but again, making sure you understand where you are at. And of course, I'm speaking first to the Southwest. But I mentioned the rest of the country, and that's going to spread, and we're going to continue, the Lord willing, to do that type of information. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. Be safe, and God bless every one of you.